The sixth house in astrology is often a huge source of stress. Why? Well, because it's tied to illness and servitude, hard work, and mundane routines. In fact, in traditional astrology, the sixth house is considered to be wholly malefic in its influence. And in medical astrology, it is the house to look at when it comes to health and healing. In fact, it is so much the house to look at when it comes to health and healing that in my Medical Astrology Foundations course, the lecture on the sixth house is an hour and 40 minutes long. And that's not covering everything. We have more sixth house stuff in some of the other lectures as well. It is a huge topic in medical astrology because it is the house of health. In modern astrology, the sixth house is painted in a little bit of a rosier light. It's the house of meaningful service and our day-to-day work routines and experience. In this video, we're going to cover everything you need to know about the sixth house in traditional astrology, medical astrology, and in modern astrology. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And trust me, if this sounds exciting to you, you're definitely one of my favorite people. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an important astrology tutorial just like this one. So because this is the house of health and illness and healing, and it is the medical astrology house, we're going to start with the medical astrology implications. The sixth house is the house where we can see where you are prone to illness or what types of illnesses you might be more prone to. This is where illness often shows up in transit and with the planetary energies that are embedded in your chart, the natural tendencies of your body as a result of those planetary influences, those planetary patterns and aspects. And we're going to talk a lot about the planets, of course, in the sixth house in this video, so you'll get a little bit of an insight there. Not only does the sixth house show indicators for potential illness or weakness in the body, it also shows how you can best heal. It shows what you need to do in your day-to-day life, those day-to-day health routines that will help you to maintain good health or attain good health if you don't already have it. Sometimes when we look at the sixth house, we can see that maybe what we're doing, even though we think it's the best thing for us because all of the experts, all of the social media influencers, all of the people out there tell us it is, but it's not the best for us personally because we are all a little bit different. We are bio-individual. We have different needs based on our genetics and based on our astrological blueprint as well. And so the sixth house can help us to see what to focus on in order to improve our health or maintain our health if we're already in a good, healthy state. It can also show us where we might become a little bit lazy or lax when it comes to our health or healthcare routines. And it can help us to pick the exact things that we need in order to stick to a healthy routine. If you have certain placements in your chart and you're trying to do really intense cardio or strength training or something that's really routine and monotonous, maybe you have some Uranus in there, it's not going to work for you, right? So it's really important to understand what you're going to stick with, what's going to feel good for you, what you can bring into your daily health habits and routines in order to live your healthiest, most vibrant life. When it comes to illness and disease, the sixth house often shows diseases that are either inherited, chronic, or recurring, and often these diseases are triggered by our day-to-day habits, our day-to-day routines, lifestyle factors. And because of this, these illnesses that are very much tied to our sixth house energy often respond really well to diet and lifestyle changes. I have a ton of examples of this in my Medical Astrology Foundations course, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about this in my free Medical Astrology 101 workshop, which is running from February 29th through March 6th of 2024, in case you're watching this somewhere in the future. And you can still register for one of our live replays at the link in the description below. And of course, Medical Astrology Foundations will be opening very soon too, so keep an eye out for that. But in addition to kind of illnesses that can be easily remedied by doing the right things for our body, maybe not easily, because you do have to put in the work. That's kind of the issue here. Putting in the work and doing it on a routine, regular basis, that's probably, what got you into the situation in the first place, was doing the wrong things or not doing anything really. And so changing those patterns, that can be very helpful when there's a huge sixth house implication inflammation and illness. Not always the case, you guys. There are exceptions to every rule. We have to look at the whole chart when it comes to medical astrology, but by and large, this does seem to be a thing. In addition to this, though, stress-induced conditions can show up very strongly in the 6th house. Why? Because the 6th house is stressful. It's our work. It's our day-to-day habits and routines with our work. It's especially our work if we are employees and working in service of somebody else or somebody else's goals and ambitions. It also can be the area of caregiving and service, where we take on too much when it comes to the care of other people in our lives. And some people are going to be more prone to doing that than others. And the 6th house and those planets that we're about to get into will show you that as well. This is why healthcare workers often have strong 6th house influences in their chart, especially when it comes to support staff, nurses, technicians, assisted care workers, caregivers, things of that nature, because it is a 6th house thing, which we'll talk about a little bit more once we get past this medical astrology little section here. We're almost finished. But going back to our habits, right? Our nutrition, our eating. Our eating habits and food choices show up as a combination most commonly between our 6th house ruler, and our moon's energy. These 3 components make up what we eat and how we eat it. And especially in the 6th house, it shows our eating habits and routines. It can show us whether we eat really quickly on the go, whether we like to slow down and savor our meals, whether we like our foods hot and spicy or cool and calming or bland maybe. I have some examples of that too in my chart database. But it also shows things like nursing habits in infants and babies. And so if you have a child and you're having difficulty with their eating or with their nursing, looking at the 6th house can give you huge clues as to what you need to do in order to make things better in that realm. And so the 6th house is important for so many reasons. And again, if you are interested in medical astrology, make sure you check out my Medical Astrology 101 workshop, 100% free, from February 29th through March 6th. Join now before it closes, because once it closes and it goes away for good. But moving on to the additional significations of the 6th house beyond medical astrology. So as I mentioned in the medical astrology portion of this video, the 6th house is the house of service, servitude, and caregiving. In modern Western astrology, where a lot of things are painted in a lighter, fluffier kind of light, it's become the house of where we go to find meaningful work or meaningful service, where we show up in service of others. And absolutely, it can be the case, especially if you have really nice 6th house energy. The 6th house is a traditionally malefic house because of a lot of the topics that it's associated with, and because of the way that it aligns with the ascendant. That's especially the reason. But you can find good energy in your 6th house, positivity in your 6th house through acts of service, through giving back and helping others, especially when it comes to health and healthcare, but really in all areas. If you have strong 6th house energy, you might be a really good support system to your employer, to other people in your life, to your friends and family members. And that's beautiful, and that can be okay, especially if that's something that you came here to do. If that's part of your purpose, then that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. However, the 6th house is not always so beautiful and pleasant. In fact, in traditional astrology, the 6th house was tied to slaves and slavery. In this day and age, it can still be tied to those things. Slavery still exists. However, in kind of a more modern context for most people watching this video, it's going to be applicable when it comes to service industries and service workers, people that work for us. And so even if you're not an employer, even if you're not somebody who's in a management position, this can still be applicable to you, because we all, most of us at least, hire people to do things for us. Whether it's changing your oil or mowing your lawn or cutting your hair, whatever it is that you need, that you have to pay someone else to do, that person is a 6th house person in your life. And so that's where the 6th house tends to show up in modern times. It also shows up in your own work and your own day-to-day work experience. The 6th house can make you a huge workaholic, getting into the weeds of things even when you don't necessarily want to. It can make it so it's hard for you to delegate or really easy for you to delegate. It just depends on what's going on in your 6th house, especially with these planets that we're about to be talking about in just a moment here. And finally, on a little bit of a happier note, the 6th house is the house of animals and pets, our four-legged friends. Traditionally, it was more like working animals. So, you know, if you had a farm and you had like a livestock dog, maybe you do still today, you know, your farm animals. So more like animals that serve some sort of purpose where they are actually doing something for you or for your farm or for your household or whatever. But it still holds true today that the 6th house is the house of pets, and oftentimes your pets will show up in the 6th house. And no, they don't show up in the 5th house. They're not your babies. Unless you gave birth to your dog, it's not in your 5th house. Sorry, guys. All right, so now that we've got that cleared up, let's get into what you came here for, the planets in the 6th house. If you have 6th house planets, this is going to be very interesting to you because it's going to show you not only where there could be trouble for you, but what you need to do in order to work with the energy of your 6th house planets instead of working against it. So I hope you find this really valuable. Comment below and let me know what planets you have in the 6th house and how you're working with them and how this maybe ties into what I'm talking about here today in this video. All right, so starting of course with the sun, which is both a planet and a luminary when it comes to astrology. The sun in astrology represents the soul's expression of purpose in physical reality. It's connected to what you need in order to feel lit up and successful and satisfied with life. And yes, if you have the sun in the 6th house, you need to work and work hard. You need meaningful work, and you need to do work where you feel like you are in service of someone else, where you are helping somebody or doing something purposeful. You need to be useful when you have the sun in the 6th house. There is also this energy of potentially tying into health and healing, where health becomes a bigger energy, a bigger topic or theme in your life. Maybe you're a healthcare worker, or maybe you have some sort of health issues, or maybe you're just really into your health. All of these things can be a potential. It really depends on what the sun is doing, what sign it's in, and which planetary aspects are being made with the sun. That can tell you a lot more of a nuanced interpretation of how this plays out for you. But typically, people with the sun in the 6th house are hard workers. They're very generous with their time and energy. They help their employees and coworkers quite a lot, and they can actually be really great in leadership positions, especially more like middle management, where they are working for someone else, but they are still kind of in charge because they can show up and show others the way really, really easily. However, if you have a 6th house sun, you do have to be careful not to be taking on other people's work and doing everything for everyone else, doing everyone's jobs. That can be a 6th house sun thing as well. It's an energy where you need to learn to delegate, but you might have trouble doing so. So in addition to this extreme need to feel useful, the sun in the 6th house does have health implications. The sun in medical astrology represents our overall vitality, our life force energy, our chi. It's also our heart function and our circulation that is very much tied into the energy of the sun. And so when you have the sun in the 6th house, your heart and your circulatory system might become more important when it comes to your health, and more important to focus on and care for when it comes to your health as well. This is also an energy that can be depleting to your life force energy, usually because you tend to do too much for too many people. And so that's where you need to kind of work on things, work on delegating, work on distributing, work on being a leader instead of the person doing all the stuff all the time for all the people. That can be very helpful when it comes to improving your health on a behavioral and psychological level, because it reduces stress and it improves your energy levels and your vitality, which is very much what the sun is all about. Also, the sun, very literally in medical astrology, represents the sun and vitamin D and the synthesis of vitamin D that happens when we get real sunlight on our skin. And the sun and sunlight is extra important for health when it comes to people who have the sun in the 6th house. So make sure that you're getting out there and getting sunlight exposure. Healthy sunlight exposure, obviously. Don't burn yourself in the middle of the day when it's 110 degrees or something along those lines. But sun exposure is really important to our health, and that's going to be extra important for those who have the sun in the 6th house. And also vitamin D. If you have a really wonky sun that is super afflicted and it's in the 6th house, you might have some vitamin D issues. And so you want to make note of that, look into that. Again, this is not medical advice. Definitely check with your healthcare provider, but just, have an awareness that sunlight, vitamin D, these things are really important. Even nutritional sources of vitamin D can be very important for you as well. And the biggest thing when it comes to the sun is just the fact that your day-to-day health routines and what you do on a day-to-day basis to keep yourself healthy is so important when it comes to your energy levels, your vitality, and your overall health, just because of that sun connection. So making sure that you're taking time to take care of yourself, that you're eating right, that you're doing, really good physical activity. Doing physical activity out in the sunlight would actually be the best for people who have sun in the 6th house. But whatever it is that you're doing, make sure that you're focusing on your diet, your nutrition, your stress levels, all of those things, because you're going to have so much more energy when you're doing the right things. Anyone would, but for you in particular, you really need to focus on these things. And when your routines are off kilter and you're out of your normal habits and you're out of your normal kind of flow of things, that's going to throw off your energy really, really badly. So you want to make sure that you have that flow, that you have those cycles and rhythms in your life. So the moon represents, of course, our emotions. And so moon in the 6th house people are very much governed by their emotions when it comes to their health. Your emotions and your inner world are very, very important when it comes to the health of your physical body. There is that mind-body connection. Everything is connected, and your emotions do have a biochemical implication when it comes to the way that they impact your body. We know this through science. And so making sure that you are in a positive emotional state, that you're not letting your emotions run the show, that's going to be so important. So emotional health and emotional intelligence, that's going to be crucial for your physical health and the health of your physical body if you do have the moon in the 6th house. The moon also represents our unconscious habits and routines. It's very likely that you are a creature of habit. This means that you are ruled by your unconscious habits, your unconscious routines, more so than you might even realize. You might not know why you're doing things every single day. You might not even realize that you're doing them and holding on to these patterns, but likely you are. The moon also is very tied into our food choices and our food habits, and this can be a very big energy for emotional eating or unconsciously choosing certain foods based on your emotional world or based on habit and routine. So being aware of your unconscious habits when it comes to your day-to-day life, your day-to-day experience, and your health, and the why behind you're doing them, because you might not actually know why, you're just kind of doing them on autopilot, that's going to be super, super important. So breaking out of the types of habits and routines, especially when it comes to food, that are not good for you. Food is the most important thing for your health when you have the moon in the 6th house, because the moon is so tied to food and the 6th house is so tied to food and nutrition. So making sure what you're putting into your body is really, really nutrient dense, is really, really healing for you, is really good and healthy and nourishing. That's going to be one of the most important things you can do for yourself with the moon in the 6th house. However, because there is this emotional attachment to food, it can be one of the most difficult things to do for yourself when you have the moon in the 6th house as well. So overcoming that emotional component or getting help with that emotional component, getting a support system, maybe some sort of coach or nutritionist or somebody who specializes maybe in emotional eating, if that is applicable to you. It's not going to be applicable to everyone with the moon in the 6th house, but if that is, then that can be important as well. This can also indicate, the moon representing the mother and the 6th house having to do with health and this caregiver energy. A lot of times people who have moon in the 6th house, they have to take on a caregiver role for their mother at some point in their life, or their mother becomes their caregiver, even into adulthood. Usually this is an energy where their mom is very involved in their day-to-day life and their day-to-day experience. If their mother is in the picture and is around, it depends again on other things going on in the chart too, but there's a very close tie with that caregiver energy and that day-to-day life experience, that day-to-day routine, and that energy of the person's mother. And when it comes to your day-to-day work, your day-to-day habits, your day-to-day routines, you are a natural caregiver, you are a natural support system to others. And that could be a role that you play in your work or even amongst your coworkers. And that can be a really beautiful thing, but again, you can tend to take on too much emotional baggage, too much emotional responsibility for other people in your day-to-day life, and that can hurt you emotionally. And what hurts you emotionally hurts you physically. So you do want to make sure that you're having really appropriate boundaries and you're aware of what you're taking on, not just physically, but subjectively, emotionally, when it comes to your feelings and your internal experience. How is what you're taking on for other people impacting you in that way? Going back to kind of the medical astrology implications, because this is the biggest health house, the moon is the general significator of the body when it comes to medical astrology. It also represents the limbic system of the brain and the hippocampus. It represents the waters and fluids and lubrications of the body and all of the protective sacs and membranes that our body has within it. And so all of these things can be much more important to focus on and pay attention to and nurture when it comes to your health. For women in particular, the moon is extra important because it rules our ovaries, it rules our womb, it rules our reproductive system and our reproductive hormones. It also rules the breasts. And so this is an area that you're going to need to spend more time focusing on, caring for, looking at what you can do to make sure your hormones are regulated and functioning optimally. That can be very, very useful for women who have moon in the 6th house. So again, fertility, ovarian hormones, our reproductive system, looking at things like the brain, the limbic system. This is also a big energy too, because the limbic system contains the hypothalamus, which is part of the hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis. And so when you're looking at the HPA axis, that is tied into the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is our fight and flight response. Why did I just tell you all of this? Because moon in the 6th house people are going to have a more active energy when it comes to their limbic system. That's going to be very important to pay attention to. And your limbic system impacts your body's physiological response to stress. And so moon in the 6th house people can get stressed out a lot more easily on a physiological level. Even if psychologically they don't feel as stressed, they're actual hormonal and neurological response to stress, their biological response to stress can be elevated in comparison to other people. So that's just something important to make note of as well. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of your nervous system, that you're taking care of your stress levels, and especially those emotions. Finally, because the moon is such a sensitive energy and it is tied to food, and it's also very much implicated when it comes to allergies. You'll learn that in the Medical Astrology 101 workshop if you join us for free. Because of all of these connections here, people with the moon in the 6th house do tend to be more prone to food sensitivities and food allergies, especially if their moon is afflicted in some way. And so if your moon is at its fall or at its detriment, so if it's at the sign of Capricorn or if it's in the sign of Scorpio, if it's being heavily afflicted by aspects from other planets, these are things to consider because you might be more prone to just having difficulties with certain foods. I've seen this especially with dairy with the moon, but it can really be a lot of different types of foods. It just depends. If you have Mercury in your 6th house, you need to learn new things every single day. Meaningful work that uses your mind and your communication skills is so crucial to your overall happiness and well-being. This is an energy that can be very tied in with caregiving through communication, healing through communication. In fact, Carl Jung is somebody who has Mercury in the 6th house as a notable placement, among other. And you'll actually see a lot of coaches, a lot of therapists, a lot of counselors, things like that with Mercury in that 6th house placement. Also, just mental health care in general can be very prominent when it comes to that Mercury in the 6th house placement, regardless of what your role might be. Keeping your brain active is so crucial to health, and especially because Mercury is the planet that rules the brain and nervous system. It's not just communication, it's cognitive function, it's your actual brain function. And so keeping your brain healthy through exercising it and utilizing it on a day-to-day basis is very, very important to your overall health and your overall, again, satisfaction with life. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of your nervous system and your brain. Speaking of the nervous system, Mercury in the 6th house people can be prone to overusing their brain and having a little bit of an overstimulated nervous system, especially if Mercury is in a fire sign or if it's afflicted in some way. These are people that tend to overthink every single thing that they do. They tend to have a lot of communication, a lot of busyness, a lot of chaos thrown at them on a day-to-day basis, and that can be overwhelming to the nervous system. So these are people that need to focus on regulating their nervous system through mercurial things like journaling, breath work, chanting, anything that's mercurial. Meditation can be mercurial too, especially if you have a specific point of focus or a mantra or something that you're really visualizing and honing in on, training your brain in some way. Speaking of which, if you are somebody who has some sort of chronic illness, brain retraining can be very helpful for people who have Mercury in the 6th house, because your brain and what you're thinking impacts your body for all of us, but especially with that Mercury in the 6th house, it can be the key component. Even if Mercury is tied to your 6th house in some way through its connection to the 6th house ruler or its connection to a planet in the 6th house, this can be very important to focus on as well. Your mental health and the health of your brain, the thoughts that you think are going to have a bigger impact on your body than it will for other people. And so you really want to focus on that. You really want to pay attention to it. And so overall, for people with Mercury in the 6th house, the biggest thing to focus on, the thing that's most important, is taking care of your mental health, regulating stress, and finding meaningful ways to use your brain in ways that are new and exciting every single day. And when it comes to movement, you want to incorporate movement that also gets your brain thinking, that you have to use your brain with. So it's not just moving your body in a repetitive fashion. You need something that involves maybe strategy, like a sport, or mental focus, like a martial art. There are a lot of things that you can do that really help facilitate and hone in on that mind-body connection. That is going to be the best thing that's going to keep you interested and excited about your workouts, but it's also going to be really the best thing for your mind and body as well. Venus in the 6th house people have a need for balance, harmony, beauty, and connection in everyday life. They tend to form really beautiful, harmonious relationships through their work, or really strong connections with people through their work, unless they have something else going on in their 6th house or their Venus is afflicted. Venus in the 6th house people do need meaningful one-on-one connection. They need relationships to stimulate their immune system, to stimulate their bodies, to stimulate their health. And they do best when it comes to food and exercise when they have a buddy, when they have a friend, when they have a spouse or a significant other who is willing to be on board with them, to go along for the ride. They need a partner or a support system, somebody that they can count on to keep them accountable and that they can keep accountable as well. So if you are somebody with Venus in the 6th house who's struggling with laziness or poor food choices, those are things that can happen with Venus in the 6th house, which we'll talk about. Having a support system through another person, even if it's a coach or, you know, a nutritionist or something along those lines, like someone that you're hiring, that's going to be the best way for you to meet your goals, because that relationship and that connection is so, so important. And having connections in your life is going to be very important to your health as well. So the health of your relationships very much is tied in with the health of your body. Venus rules the hormones and endocrine function when it comes to the body in general. It's the planet that's most closely associated to the body's homeostatic system, so the way that the body keeps itself in balance. And it's also tied to the veins, so the venous system. I used to think that that was just because of the name and maybe it didn't apply, but I have seen evidence that it can be applicable. And also glucose metabolism, because Venus is very tied into sugar, which brings me to my next point. You have to take care of your hormones, your endocrine system, and also your sugar and your blood sugar levels when you have very strong Venus 6th house energies. Because Venus is a sugary energy and the 6th house rules food, Venus in the 6th house people can indulge in sugary treats, and they can tend to be very lax or very lazy when it comes to their nutrition and their nutritional habits, just kind of going with whatever tastes best and feels best, because it is such a sensual energy and it really wants to indulge in the sensory experience. That is Venus. And Venus is also the most lax and relaxed energy of all of the 10 planets. And so it can cause laziness when it comes to food and when it comes to your workout routine. So again, having somebody who can help keep you accountable, that's going to make it more exciting for you, and it's going to make it more likely for you to stick with it. But also doing things that feel really good. If you're trying to do a really strict regimented Saturnian diet and you have Venus in the 6th house, that's not going to work. You need to indulge your sweet tooth in healthy ways, in small doses. If you feel like you're restricting yourself and you're not able to have the pleasurable experience that you want when you're eating, you're not going to do it. So you want to make sure that you are incorporating healthier variations of comfort foods and allowing yourself those little treats without overindulging. That's going to be key for Venus in the 6th house people to stick with healthy eating. And also when it comes to your exercise routines, do things that feel good and reward yourself with some sort of indulgence, not necessarily food. Don't go and eat like, piles of ice cream or something right after your workout, but because that's kind of counterproductive, right? But, maybe if you do all of your workouts this week, you go and you get a massage, you get body work. And body work is a really great thing for Venus in the 6th house people as well. So definitely make sure that you're incorporating that into your routine as much as you can. But overall, even though Venus is prone to indulgence and modern diseases that are connected to indulgences and excess and ease, Venus is a benefic influence, and it's typically considered a positive health indicator. Like, yeah, you're indulging, but you can get away with it maybe a little more so than other people, so long as you're not going crazy with it. Mars in the 6th house can be a tricky one. Mars has its joy in the 6th house, and as somebody with this placement, I can tell you it's not very joyful. This is considered joy, like a joy, because Mars loves being in the 6th house because Mars is malefic, the 6th house is malefic. Mars can carry out its malefic influences very easily in the 6th house. However, it does have some positive qualities, which we'll get into. Mars in the 6th house people tend to be very intense when it comes to their work, their workouts, their daily routines. They want to do what they want to do when they want to do it. So having too tight a schedule is not good for Mars in the 6th house people because they are very ambitious and very driven, but only when they feel that surge of energy or passion toward what they're doing, which kind of leads me into the health implications here. So Mars in the 6th house people can get carried away, especially at the onset of a project, and so they tend to overdo it when it comes to their work. They'll burn themselves out very quickly because they burn too brightly all at once, and then they kind of fizzle out, and then they can't complete their tasks. And so that's something to kind of be aware of with Mars in the 6th house. You feel like you can do all of it all at once, but you can't. Like, nobody can do that. So you want to parcel out your energy as much as you can, hold back even if you feel like you can keep going and going, because that's going to help you actually see things through to the very end when it comes to your work and also when it comes to your health. More intensive exercise in smaller bursts, so like high intensity interval training or something along those lines, can be really great for Mars and Aries people. But really, Mars and Aries people have to work out and exercise when they feel like that they have that energy to burn. So if in the moment you're feeling really good and you're like, today I need to just move on that day. If the next day you're not feeling as much like you need to move, still move on that day, because Mars and Aries people need movement every single day. It's just a matter of what level and where your energy level's at. And doing a lot of different types of activity can be really great for Mars and Aries because you have to feel really fired up about it in the moment. So if you have like 5 different things to choose from that you're really good at and that you're set up to do, that's going to be best, because in that moment on that day, you're going to maybe feel like going for a run, or you're going to maybe feel like lifting weights, or you're going to maybe feel like going to that Pilates class. But the next day, you might feel like something completely different. That's okay. You need to do what feels exciting to you right then and there, and that's how you're going to do the best when it comes to exercise. When it comes to food, Mars in the 6th house people tend to eat very quickly. They tend to like their food very, very hot also. So food that is spicy can be very appealing to Mars in the 6th house people. But when I'm saying heat, I'm actually talking about physical, like actual temperature heat. So Mars in the 6th house people hate their food being cold. If they don't eat the moment it comes out of the oven, they're not going to eat it. And I know this because I have Mars in the 6th house too. I get so mad, and it's in Aries, when I make a bunch of food and my husband's not there immediately to eat it with me because I have to wait and then it gets cold. So Mars in the 6th house people are impatient when it comes to their meals, but partially that can be because they like it hot. Mars in the 6th house people tend to eat on the go, so they'll just eat whatever random stuff they can while they're on the move. And so you do have to be aware of that, because chewing your food and like eating properly and being mindful of what you're eating can be really, really important. And so you want to be aware of that. Because Mars is the planet that's associated with iron and with protein, people with Mars in the 6th house need adequate bioavailable protein sources. So that can look like red meat, organ meats, meat in general. If you are somebody who wants to be vegetarian or vegan and you have Mars in the 6th house, you have to be so careful with what you're doing and what you're eating, because you're going to need to supplement a lot of stuff. You're going to need to make sure you're getting the right amount of protein, the right amount of amino acids. Everyone needs that, especially if they're doing like a plant-based diet. But Mars in the 6th house people are going to have a harder time with that than other people. So you want to be very careful and maybe rethink what you're doing if that's not something that you need to be doing for whatever reason. Mars in the 6th house people are also going to be more inflammatory. So because Mars is inflammation, fevers, heat, and also pain, they're going to be more prone to having these types of conditions. I've seen plenty of Mars in the 6th house people with chronic pain of some kind. And so again, just doing things to reduce inflammation can be very, very important for Mars. And that can be especially when it comes to your stress levels, because stress and activation of the sympathetic nervous system, this adrenal overkill that Mars in the 6th house people tend to experience, also makes you more inflammatory. It makes you all inflamed, and inflammation is, associated with pain. And so you want to make sure that you're doing things to calm your adrenals, to calm your nervous system, to kind of balance out those adrenal hormones, and that you're also, eating a diet that isn't super inflammatory as well. And so whatever that looks like for you, have at it. They do tend to also be more accident and injury prone because they're moving through life really quickly, and especially when it comes to their day-to-day experience, they get a lot of little injuries and accidents like on the job or, while they're going about their life. And so again, slowing down is going to be important on a day-to-day basis when it comes to Mars, but not slowing down to the point where you fizzle out or that you're dampening your fire, because you do need to burn that in some way. Because Mars is a malefic energy and it has to do with arguments, disputes, separations, things like that, it can make things difficult when you are working with others. Does not play well with others. That's Mars in the 6th house for a lot of people, especially if you're an employee. So like there can be headbutting with your coworkers and things like that that come up quite frequently because you're somebody who wants to do things your way when you want to do it. And so Mars in the 6th house people do better as solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, people that are doing things for themselves. They can be very beautiful, motivating forces when it comes to their employees or their coworkers, but they don't necessarily want to do things somebody else's way. And so again, you have to kind of figure out a way to work around that with Mars in the 6th house. Mars in the 6th house people can also end up in caregiver positions for people that are sick or sick or injured animals can come up quite a lot for Mars in the 6th house people as well. And taking on that role can actually be a good remedy for Mars in the 6th house to offset some of the more challenging energies that can come about if you're intentionally using it in that way. So when it comes to Jupiter in the 6th house, this is actually one of the better health markers that I've seen when it comes to 6th house energies. Typically, you can get away with a lot. You have, ease, luck, good fortune when it comes to your health. When you do have health issues with Mars in the 6th house, it's typically because of indulgence, overdoing it, diseases of excess. Because Jupiter is expansive, indulgent, it tends to be prone to excess. Jupiter, when it comes to the body in general, has to do with liver function, the cerebrum, and higher reasoning skills. It also has to do with gross motor skills, fat metabolism, and things of that nature. And because Jupiter has to do with fats, like dietary fats and fat metabolism, making sure that you're eating the right kind of fats is very important with Jupiter in the 6th house. That's where things can go kind of awry. So if you're eating like really gross processed oils and things like that, and things that are fried in like, I don't know what people are doing these days, canola oil and stuff like that, that's not going to be very good for you in general, but especially when it comes to Jupiter in the 6th, you want to be very careful about the types of dietary fats you're including. So you need fat. Everybody needs fat in their diet, but you need the right kinds of fat, and especially with that Jupiter energy, that's going to be more crucial. And also paying attention to the function of your liver. That's going to be super important for Jupiter in the 6th house people. Supporting your liver in whatever way that you can with the right foods, the right practices, the right detoxification potentially, the right herbs. That can all be really, really helpful for Jupiter in the 6th house people in particular. But typically, Jupiter in the 6th house people are more resilient. They recover more easily from disease. So they're more resistant to disease and more resilient when they do get sick. They do tend to have a little bit of a better luck on that side of things. And also they tend to work really well with groups of people. They're very well liked by their employees or by their coworkers when they have Jupiter in the 6th house. And so that can be a really nice, really pleasant energy for being in a leadership position or just working with other people. I have plenty of examples of people who, were in management positions with Jupiter in the 6th house, and their employees love them, hated all their other bosses, but loved this one person. People with Saturn in the 6th house need, you guessed it, discipline, structure, and routine. Even if you're someone with that placement who thinks you don't need these things, trust me, you do. Your body, mind, spirit, and life will benefit from adding that Saturnian structure. Saturn in the 6th house indicates a very hard worker. Usually people who have this placement are able to go and go and go, and they get a lot done. And because they do have a really high level of self-discipline when it comes to their day-to-day life, their day-to-day experiences, their day-to-day routines, and their health, they're able to make very hard, very permanent changes when it comes to turning their health around. Saturn in the 6th house is most closely tied to more chronic, long-lasting, ongoing types of issues because it's Saturn, and Saturn rules things that take time, things that take longer than you would like for them to manifest or unfold. And so with Saturn in the 6th house, you need meaningful, purposeful work that you're doing on an ongoing day-to-day basis. You need goals, not just structure and routine, but something to be working toward every single day when it comes to the big picture. Saturn in the 6th house people are pretty good at delayed gratification when it comes to their day-to-day experiences, their day-to-day routines, working toward those goals, whether those are work-related goals or health-related goals. Saturn in the 6th house is often tied to chronic conditions versus conditions that are more acute, just because of the chronic, long-lasting, slow nature of Saturn. Saturn takes time, and it often takes way more time than you want it to. And when it comes to Saturn in the 6th house, your healing could take a lot more time, a lot more effort, a lot more work. But once you've accomplished what you want to accomplish when it comes to the health of your body, you're going to feel so much more grateful for it, and you're going to feel like you earned that health because you did. You put in the work. I've seen people with Saturn in the 6th house do incredible things when it comes to overcoming serious and chronic illnesses because they are really willing to do everything they need to do in order to see those changes through. And they are very self-disciplined, and they do understand delayed gratification. They know that eating this bad thing right now in the long term is going to add up to something, that's not going to be good for them. And so they're very good at being restrictive and careful and regimented about their eating, about their exercise, and about their health routines on a day-to-day basis beyond just diet. That being said, I have seen Saturn in the 6th house become overly restrictive when it comes to their eating. I've seen everything from people who will only eat certain colors of foods. I have an example of this I'm going to go over in my webinar, the Medical Astrology 101, the free workshop. From being just so overly structured around what they eat and eating the right things all the time that they can't let loose, they can't enjoy themselves, and it becomes over the top and maybe not even health promoting anymore because it's kind of stressful, it's kind of limiting. And so Saturn in the 6th house, one of the lessons can be opening yourself up to different types of foods, to different types of experiences, to exploring new things, not just with food, but also with things like exercise. Saturn in the 6th house, people can get stuck in a rut with doing the same types of routines and exercise and activities and movement over and over and over again because that's what they know works. They want to do what they know works, right? They don't want to just fool around and do whatever. They're here to get results. And that can be problematic sometimes with Saturn in the 6th house people because things can get too dry, too dull, too monotonous, and they might not be open to something that they could end up really loving later on down the line once they get used to it, once they get into the rhythm, once they get into the hang of things. Really disciplined types of physical activity are good for Saturn in the 6th house people. So things like martial arts, or if you're going to go into something like yoga, maybe Ashtanga yoga, or something that requires this repetition and this discipline, because that is actually really good for the bodies of people who have Saturn in the 6th house, but also it's something that you're more likely to stick to. Once you have that routine, once you have that established, you're going to do it time and time again. Just make sure that you save some wiggle room and you save some space to do things a little bit differently every now and again, so you don't get too stuck in a rut and so you don't miss out on things that you might really truly enjoy. Kind of on the flip side of this energy, some Saturn in the 6th house people tend to procrastinate when it comes to exercise, when it comes to changing their diet, when it comes to doing the things that they know they need to do with their health, because they tend to be pretty all in. They're very perfectionistic. People think Virgo is perfectionistic, and yes, absolutely it is, but strong Saturn placements are way more perfectionistic than any Virgo you'll ever meet. And Saturn in the 6th house can make you perfectionistic about your diet, about your exercise, about your nutrition, about your health, to the extent where if you're not going to do it perfectly, if you're not going to do it right, then you're not going to do it at all. And that can be problematic too. It's not necessarily an all or nothing mentality. It's more like you want it to be the best, and if it can't be the best, you're not going to do it, or you can become overwhelmed with wanting to do it a very specific, certain way up to your level and standard of perfection, or maybe sometimes up to somebody else's level or standard of perfection, to the point where you just avoid doing it altogether because it's kind of overwhelming. Like, that's a stressful situation to be in, where you have to do it right, you have to do it this certain way, you have to do it every single day at 5:30 a.m. at this time, that type of thing. So give yourself some space, cut yourself some slack, and you'll do a lot better. With Saturn in the 6th house, this can also be an energy of perfectionism in the workplace, and also taking on way too much responsibility for your coworkers, for your team, for your employees. This is where you're going to be carrying the weight of other people's tasks. And I've seen this happen quite a lot too, where people who have Saturn in the 6th house, they tend to do everyone's job for them, and then they tend to become overworked and underpaid, where they're doing all the different jobs. Their titles should be like 6 different titles, but they're really been hired for one thing. But because they're doing everyone else's work, the employer, the boss, is not going to hire other people to help do those things, right? Because they're doing it so well, they're doing so much of it, and they can actually do a lot. However, in the end, this is going to burn you out, and this is not necessarily the best way to do things. It's not the most effective way to do things. And so one of the issues with Saturn in the 6th house is definitely learning to delegate and not to shoulder all of the weight of responsibility on yourself only. Going back to health, Saturn in the 6th house is considered to be a challenging influence because the 6th house is a malefic house, Saturn is a malefic planet, and so when you have the 6th house of health occupied by Saturn, it can cause delays, it can cause issues, it can cause hardships, it can cause challenges when it comes to your health. Luckily, with that Saturn 6th house energy, you're usually able to work really hard to turn things around, even if it does take a little bit longer than what you would like it to be. Saturn in the 6th house creates an emphasis on Saturnian things in the body when it comes to your health, and so it's very important to take care of your bones, your joints, your skeletal system, your teeth especially, so making sure that your teeth are healthy and that you're brushing and flossing and going to the dentist and doing all of those things that you need to do to make sure that your mouth is all in order. That's super important for Saturn in the 6th house people, but also making sure that you're getting the right nutrients and the things that you need in order to keep your bones healthy and strong. Saturn, of course, having that connection to the bones, rules calcium. And so calcium is going to be extra important to pay attention to. And if your Saturn is in the 6th house and afflicted, there could be issues with calcium. So that's just something to pay attention to, make note of, and just to have an awareness around, so that way you can work with the energy instead of working against it. When it comes to the impact on the body overall, Saturn hardens, stagnates, and cools. So this is an energy where you're going to want to be doing things to kind of counteract that, where you're going to be wanting to keep yourself moving, where you're going to be wanting to build heat, where you're going to want to make sure that you're not becoming stagnant in mind or in body. And that's where breaking out of those day-to-day habits and routines that are too structured, too regimented, and too inflexible, that's where this comes into play. Uranus in the 6th house is pretty much the exact opposite of Saturn. Uranus needs flexibility, change. It does not like consistency. And when it comes to the way that you deal with your health, that is going to be key. Making sure that you're switching it up, changing it up, doing new and exciting things every single day. That's going to help you stick with your health routines, if you can even call them that, when you have Uranus in the 6th house, because when Uranus is in your 6th house natally, you have a very hard time sticking to any sort of routine. And so the best routine is no routine, and just rolling with the punches and making sure that you have a lot of really exciting activities that you can do every single day that improve your health. So making sure that you're trying new and exciting healthy foods, making sure that you're trying new and exciting healthy ways of exercising and moving your body. Also, this is a great energy for using technology when it comes to your health. Biohacking is a huge thing for Uranus in the 6th house. Biohacking is a huge thing for Uranus in the 6th house. Uranus is technology, the 6th house is health. You merge those two things together and you will make some magic. So looking into different technological advances that you can use to help improve your body, that is going to be absolutely wonderful for Uranus in the 6th house. Uranus isn't just technology, it's also electricity. Electromagnetic fields and energies in your environment can impact your body more so than other 6th house placements. And so you want to make sure that you're doing some of those basic things, like not sticking your phone right up to your head, turning your Wi-Fi off at night, getting yourself out of the city and out of all of that electromagnetic smog every now and again can be a huge breath of fresh air and can be very, very helpful to people who have Uranus in the 6th house to reset your body's own electrical system, because that's going to be something that's going to be a little bit more temperamental, because Uranus rules the body electrics, both the kind of like metaphysical body electrics and the electrical systems in our brain, nervous system, heart, and throughout our bodies that we know through modern science exist. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're taking care of your electricity, and through doing other things, not just getting yourself away from electromagnetic smog, but making sure that you're getting the right balance of vitamins, nutrients, and electrolytes, things that help the electrical connectivity throughout the body to flow really nicely and really smoothly. Those are all really good things to focus on when you have Uranus in the 6th house. And when it comes to just living a healthy and exciting and happy life on a day-to-day basis, Uranus needs to shake things up. You're not going to be able to do well in like a corporate environment where things are stuffy and regimented and you have to do all of these things in a certain way and follow all of these rules. Uranus in the 6th house people are mavericks. You need to do things in your own way, your own strange way, regardless of what other people think about what it is that you're doing. You're probably the office weirdo, because you're always doing things outside of the box and thinking about things in new and innovative ways. But that also makes you very, very valuable in the workplace, because you're the one that's going to break outside of the mold and question, why the heck have we been doing it this way for 20 something years? This doesn't make sense. We have this new technology or this new way of doing things. So you are the office innovator. And if you are somebody who works for yourself, obviously this is going to help you in a lot of different ways. Working with technology can be excellent for Uranus in the 6th house people. I've seen that play out time and time again, where people who have this placement can be very happy, being programmers or working in IT or, whatever it is that you do in the tech sector. And now we're coming into Neptune in the 6th house. This one can be actually pretty difficult. It's one of the more difficult placements in the 6th house that I've seen overall for a wide variety of reasons. The main one being that Neptune makes things very sensitive, and it makes your body in the 6th house of health very sensitive. You are much more sensitive to environmental toxins, to emotions, to energies, to everything that shows up that you are exposed to. And so this can make your body much more temperamental, and it can make you more prone to being thrown off kilter by things that are outside of your control. It also makes it so you don't have very good boundaries when it comes to your work and when it comes to your coworkers and when it comes to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Neptune in the 6th house is a prime placement for becoming not just a caregiver, but almost like a martyr, where you're taking on everyone else's stuff and it's just not so good. You're doing it at the detriment of your own health, of your own well-being, of your own responsibilities, of the ways that you need to show up for your own work. And so Neptune in the 6th house people have to learn boundaries, especially when it comes to showing up in service and doing things that are useful for others, because they can really overdo it and not have good boundaries in that way. And that can impact you not just, in terms of your day-to-day life satisfaction, but it can really weigh on you and it can impact your health. So boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. If you have Neptune in the 6th house, that's going to be so important. And just as, these people have issues with boundaries when it comes to their work and their day-to-day experience, boundaries with the body are an issue. That's why they're so sensitive. And so when it comes to Neptune in the 6th house, Neptune is an energy that is very mysterious, very intangible, very nebulous, very malleable, and very boundaryless. This can cause people to be prone to not just chronic conditions, but mysterious health conditions that are very difficult to diagnose, pin down, figure out what the heck they are. I've seen this a lot with Neptune in the 6th house, and this can be very, not just challenging in terms of like figuring out what it is and healing your body, but mentally, this can be very, very difficult. It can psychologically be very damaging to not know what the heck is wrong with you and ask all of these people and go to all these specialists and have them question you, tell you you're crazy, tell you that there's nothing wrong with you when you know very well that there is. This is an experience that happens a lot with Neptune in the 6th house, or Neptune squaring a planet in the 6th house, or Neptune with the ruler of the 6th house in some way. I see this quite a lot, and it can be really frustrating. However, with Neptune in the 6th house, you can actually benefit from very alternative means of healing. And so looking at things from not just a physical perspective and not just a psychological perspective and not just an environmental or an emotional perspective, but from a holistic perspective and an energetic perspective. Looking at your health in terms of the ways that all things are connected, which is what medical astrology does best, that can be crucial to healing when you have Neptune in the 6th house, especially when you have one of these mystery illnesses or mystery diagnoses where you don't really know what the heck is going on. This is also a common indicator, which I'm sure you're probably already thinking about, for misdiagnosis, because 6th house is the body and Neptune is confusion. And so I've also seen with all of these confusing confusing kind of nebulous types of conditions where the symptoms are all over the place and it's really hard to pin down, people being misdiagnosed as having something that they don't even have and going through the wrong types of treatment and things like that. So it's just something to be aware of. If you have Neptune in the 6th house, get a second opinion, get a third opinion, get a fourth opinion, get as many opinions as you need to feel very confident in what's going on with your body, because clarity is key, and you have a very unclear energy when it comes to your health in the 6th house. And when it comes to like actually taking care of your health and your health routines, Neptune can make things kind of difficult. It can be very hard for Neptune in the 6th house people to deal with the harsh realities of day-to-day life and their day-to-day routines and their day-to-day work. They're prone to escapism. They're prone to laziness. They're prone to being a little too overly sensitive when it comes to these types of things, which can make it very difficult to hold a job or to just live life or be in the world. This can also make it difficult to stick to any sort of diet or exercise routine. Part of this with the diet is because they are so sensitive. So Neptune rules a few different things. It rules allergies and poisons. It rules this energy of confusion and leakiness. And it's also things like pineal gland function. So you want to make sure that your sleep-wake cycles are good and that, again, you're turning off your Wi-Fi at night. You want to do things that are going to help with your pineal gland function and your melatonin, because Neptune rules melatonin. And so making sure that you're taking care of that in your body is going to be really important as well. But it is an energy where, because of that confusion and that malleability, it makes people more susceptible to poisons and things that are toxic in our environment and those allergies. And because it makes you more prone to allergies, this can lead to being more sensitive to not just environmental allergies and things like that, but to actual foods. And so this is another one where you'll see people having a lot of weird multiple chemical sensitivities, food sensitivities, things of that nature. And so again, this can be hard to pin down, especially even in this day and age. It can be very hard to pin down. So getting expert advice and getting more expert advice and making sure that what you're getting really feels right to you and is working for you, that's going to be very important. But this can also make it so it's very confusing to know what the heck you should be eating and why you should be eating it. So diet is really hard to pin down for people who have Neptune in the 6th house because of all their sensitivities, but because of a lot of conflicting information that comes in that they have a hard time making sense of. So with this, just keep it simple. Keep it as simple as possible and maybe divert to somebody who really knows what they're doing. Somebody maybe with Saturn in the 6th house can help you out there. When it comes to exercise, Neptune in the 6th house people do best with exercise that is spiritual or creative or flowy in nature. They do really well with things like dance or yoga or Tai Chi. It needs to have this energy of flow and this energy of energy, right? So if you do something that has that spiritual connection, like yoga, that is one of the best ways that you can utilize that Neptune in the 6th house energy to improve your health through movement. If you're doing something that has that creative flow, like dance, again, that's one of the best ways that you can utilize Neptune in the 6th house for improving your health through movement. Neptune is also a very watery energy. It's named for the god of the ocean, of course. And so very literally connecting with water. So a lot of times people with Neptune in the 6th house or water sign 6th houses, they enjoy swimming or doing water sports or water activities. And that can be another way to incorporate this energy and to utilize it to keep you motivated to stay active. And last but not least, Pluto in the 6th house. Pluto is the planet when it comes to detoxification. This is an energy that makes it more important for you to focus on detox and making sure that, your elimination channels are open and flowing and working properly, because Pluto in the 6th house can be prone to toxic buildup, to toxicity in general. And so you want to make sure that you're taking care of that. Pluto in medical astrology also rules certain types of surgeries, especially amputations and organ removals. And it's not completely uncommon for somebody with Pluto in the 6th house to have had their appendix removed or their tonsils removed, especially if there's other indicators for that. But that's not always the case, you guys, with Pluto in the 6th house, so don't worry that you're going to have body parts taken away. That's usually not what happens, but when you see those things happen, a lot of times there is a Pluto involvement in the 6th house or otherwise. Pluto is a very obsessive energy. It's all in or it's not. And so with Pluto in the 6th house, people can become obsessive about their health routines, their eating habits, their exercise habits, to the point where it can be a little bit of a problem. The biggest thing with Pluto in the 6th house is making sure that you're being flexible and that it's not all black and white. Done is better than perfect, and you don't have to go all in on everything. Pluto in the sixth house people are usually very focused, very hard workers, and they can become obsessive over their work as well. And so that can be really good when you're really passionate about something and you're following a thread. However, it can be challenging in other situations. Pluto is a more solitary energy, and Pluto in the sixth house people do tend to prefer to work alone in solitude, so that way they're not interrupted because they want to be so focused on the task at hand. They're not multitaskers, and that can be excellent. They can be very, very good at what they do as a result of that, because multitasking, you guys, is not really a thing. I know people say it is, and all the Geminis here are going to be mad, but you know, they've done research on this, and science has shown that when you're doing more than one thing, you're not doing it all the way, and you're not doing a very good job at all the things. So Pluto in the sixth house people are doing a really good job at one thing. And so that can take you pretty far. And when it comes to illness in general with Pluto in the sixth house, they tend to have psychological origins or psychological roots. This is a common indicator of physiological illness rooted in some sort of psychological trauma or psychological difficulty. And so that is something to look at and to explore. This is a great energy for seeking out therapy, seeking out a psychologist. This is a really great energy for diving deeper when it comes to your mental health and seeing potentially the reverberations on how that plays out in your physical health as well. Pluto is a very deeply regenerative and restorative energy, and Pluto in the sixth house people have this really crazy ability to come back more powerful from anything when it comes to their health. And so this is a really great energy of like the phoenix rising from the ashes when it comes to dealing with anything that comes along that kind of throws your body off kilter. And so Pluto makes you resilient when it comes to your health. All right, you guys, so that is the sixth house planets. Let me know in the comment section below if you enjoyed this video and what you got out of it, if you got anything out of it. I hope to see you in the Medical Astrology 101 workshop and in my Medical Astrology Foundations course. Enrollment for that opens on February 29th, and I'm so excited. This is my favorite thing that I get to teach you guys. I love medical astrology. It is my passion, and I cannot wait to share it with you either in the free workshop or in the full course. I really hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Also, if you like this video, I have another video floating around up here about the sixth house signs based on your rising sign, and you can get another layer of information about your sixth house from this right after. So keep watching. All right, bye everyone.